Greetings, men, and welcome to another episode of Around the Fire. Ryan Schwartz here with Eric Amen. And today we are going to be unpacking and exploring what it is that at times has a man restraining himself from asking for what he wants, right? As simple as that sounds, the self-censoring and self-betrayal in not asking for what you want, expecting the world, your partner, your employees to somehow still deliver it and reorient around a will that has not been declared, and the victimhood and betrayal that comes from it. And we will wrap today with a powerful remedial practice that goes beyond simply pushing you towards declaring what you want, right, with ruthlessness, but a more skillful practice that will prepare you and empower you to do so in ways that you perhaps haven't considered were possible yet. So with that, I am in, and I will turn it over to Eric to officially open our space.
Cool. Thank you, Ryan. And thank you, men, for being here, for joining us around the fire for this conversation. At this time, I would ask you to just connect with yourself. Close your eyes, consciously creating a more present situation within yourself. And as you breathe in through your nose down into your belly, allow yourself to bring your awareness down into your body with you. And as you become more aware of your body, when you notice areas of tension or stress stored within you, you can just relax and release those on the exhale. And as you're breathing in this relaxed way, becoming more present, we call upon the cobalt blue flame to surround us with a ring of none shall pass, keeping out anything and everything not in alignment with the highest and best good of both Ryan, myself, and any and every man who engages in this recording in any way. We ask that this storage space, all digital means of communication and storage, be encrypted, keeping this transmission and this recording fully sanctified, fully sovereign, fully encrypted and safe. And at this time, I want to take a moment to honor all of the ancestors who have gone before us, all the descendants who will come after, all the wisdom keepers, lineage holders, masters, teachers, and guides, walking yesterday, today, and tomorrow. I want to honor the directions of the north, south, east, west, Father Sky above, Mother Earth below, the divine spark within, and the divine spark without. And now at this time, I ask you to just connect to the fire, and within your mind's eye, see the fire burning brightly in front of you, as if you are sitting around the fire with a group of men you trust and respect, where you can get real in a way that maybe you don't have any other spaces to get real at this level. And my request of you is that you allow space for the truth to emerge within you. Just for the next half an hour, 45 minutes, allowing yourself to get real and honest with yourself. And then from that place, taking radical responsibility for any remedial action that serves to raise your consciousness and improve your life. And with that, we seal up the perimeter, sealing, guarding, protecting. And we open up our space. And when you feel grounded in your body, you can open your eyes and join us around the fire.
Awesome. Thank you, Eric. So
Absolutely.
what comes up for me right off the bat is how strongly resistant and averse many men are to simply stating and sharing and requesting what they want, right? And they may devise all sorts of strategies. They may scheme, they may manipulate, they may tiptoe, they may attempt to create the conditions so that what they want just arises without them having to ask for it. And they may go to great lengths and great efforts and great energy expenditure to accomplish or to attempt to accomplish what can be more effectively, honestly, and ultimately more powerfully accomplished if they just stated what they wanted and requested it.
Yeah, it's interesting because I love that you brought up manipulation. And something I want to address there right away is that manipulation, and the word manipulation, has a bad rap. We view that word through a negative lens often. And in reality, there are certain levels of manipulation that are a part of the magician or the alchemist work. And they're a part of even just practicing skillful means, being artistic with getting what you desire in an intimate relationship, for example, sometimes requires you to be direct and say, I'd like to spend some time together with you tonight. And other times it may require you to grab a hold of your partner firmly and not say it with words and not be direct, but right. Which is a form of manipulation and not negative. That's what's happening. And what we want to focus on in this conversation is holding back or not holding back. And right away, what comes up for me are the times I've held back and what was behind that. Often for me, when I hold back, it's because there's a part of me who questions if I really deserve what I am choosing not to ask for. Sometimes there's a part of me who questions if I can deal with the fallout that I perceive will happen for asking for what I want.
Yep.
Sometimes it's that I don't want to have to ask for what I want because I'm being lazy.
Right.
All of those situations create an unfair expectation on the world that they will know what to do with my lack of asking for what I want.
Right. If I were to add to that my own reasons and my own self-observation of where I hold back, it's similar. There's the worthiness component, right? For me, that comes up and gets expressed as a not wanting to be a burden or an imposition or have others need to deliver upon one of my wants, right? Where I feel safer and less imposing being a benign presence in the room that demands nothing of anyone, right? And that is closely linked with this feeling that if somebody is giving me what I want or participating in that, even through their own joy and desire to do so, I feel indebted at times, right? Like I've been given something and now there's a need to reciprocate in some way. right? And I don't want to create an indebted relational quality to that. And then the other, which is a form of negative manipulation, right, is sometimes we're so invested in not getting what we want so that we can weaponize that and use that
Mm.
as some kind of bargaining chip that if we get what we want, we no longer have that opportunity, right? We can no longer hold that as a leverage chip in whatever weird manipulative game we are playing with ourselves and those we're in relationship with. So that's what's operating under the surface of my own holding back. And it's such an interesting mechanism when you witness it and observe it at play within the simple act of holding back, right? All the different forces that go into that.
Yeah, I want to drill in on the first one you mentioned there with not being a burden, right? And
Mm-hmm.
being the person in the room who doesn't ask for a thing. I love that, looking at this through that angle, and I think it's a really powerful way to look at this. Um, what's true for me in relation to this? It brings up that famous movie quote, "You can't handle the truth,"
Right.
and the way that plays out here is, for me, somebody else. The truth is, I have something I want to ask for,
Mm-hmm.
and if I choose not to ask for the thing that I want from you or from anybody, it's me choosing to say, this would be too much burden for you.
Mm-hmm.
You can't handle this.
Right.
Here's the truth. And I know how to control your reality better
Right.
than you do, so I won't ask for it.
Right.
And
Yeah.
it's this betrayal of God, essentially, or the
Mm-hmm.
universe, or because my belief here is that if there's something, and putting compulsive behavior aside, if I
Mm-hmm.
feel the impulse to ask for something, like it comes
Mm-hmm.
in, and I have a desire for something and I want to ask for something, that may be part of some bigger orchestration.
Mm-hmm.
Even if it does piss you off, even if it does overburden you, even if this is, I know that you habitually say yes to too many things,
Mm-hmm.
maybe you need to have that experience again
Right.
so that you can finally get it. And if I
Right.
hold back to because I think that it's my responsibility to control your reality, I'm
Mm-hmm.
robbing you of the opportunity to learn what you came here to learn.
Right.
I'm
That's a
stepping
really
in
fascinating
saying, "Oh,
point.
I know better than you."
Yeah. That's liberating when I hear that, right? Um, and there's a dignity component to it as well, right? In that presumption that it might be too much and a burden, we essentially create a version of that person as incapable, right?
Yeah.
Or inefficient or unwilling or not willing to gift, not willing to share. And what is relationship and life itself if not a series of gifts that are given in relationship, right?
Mm-hmm.
We are constantly gifting one another experiences. And if we choose out of our own fear, out of our own weakness, if you will, or out of our own sense of unworthiness, that we are not going to ask to be gifted experiences, right? Or things that give us joy and pleasure or opportunity, then we essentially create only a one way relationship where we're the ones who feel constantly imposed upon, right?
Mm.
And that creates its own imbalances. But what I find most fascinating based on what you just shared is how there's almost a greater safety in resenting someone and feeling bitter towards someone for not giving the thing that you didn't ask for than there is in maybe overstretching them or maybe generating a reaction in them where they feel challenged, right?
Hmm.
And there is such a deprivation of dignity in what we're doing when we do that.
Yeah. Yeah. And it's nuanced, right? Like, one thing that we're not suggesting is that you don't hold your partner, or you don't take into awareness that uh, their nervous system and where they're at and all that you know about them.
Hmm.
And at the same time, there's a line between caretaking and
Mm,
helping them soothe their nervous system by not overburdening them in a moment.
right.
And that's a skillful line to find within any relationship, whether it be intimate, friendship, professional.
Hmm.
And that is part of the path of self mastery, is knowing and feeling when it's a yes and when it's a no, to ask for that.
Hmm.
And I think that the piece that's important here is that a man asks for what he wants, and he is prepared not to
Hmm.
receive it,
Right.
right? Because if you approach this as, I'm going to just ask for everything I want, and you're going to expect to receive it, well,
Hmm.
that's very much somebody running the Prince operating system, right? Where
Right.
it's like there's a sense of entitlement that, like,
Hmm.
oh, well, I'm going to ask and you're going to give it to me because I'm
Right.
entitled to get it.
Yeah. As well, being prepared not to get it and being okay with not getting it makes the asking safer, right? Because
Yeah.
you're not fearing it being rejected. A lot of the things we don't ask for are things that we are quite certain are going to be unavailable to us, right? And I'll give you one example of that. Back when I was writing screenplays and working with producers and agents, I'd be on a conversation with an agent who, read my project, right, and maybe had a lot of good notes about it and said, "This isn't one that I feel confident bringing to market, but I really appreciate your writing style. You certainly have talent." Um, and that would be his feedback, right? And what I'd want to ask is, great, well, would you want to represent me as a writer, right? Ask that question. And the amount of times I didn't ask that question out of the fear of the no and not feeling like I can handle the no. So I've held back on that question and cut myself off from potential opportunity had that ask just been made, because I wasn't ready to receive the no, or I didn't feel capacitated to absorb a no without it
Mm.
attacking my sense of confidence, my sense of worth. So that's a major aspect to that pithy one liner you just gave, being prepared for whatever answer comes, right? Not judging or feeling betrayed by a partner who, in that moment, simply doesn't have the capacity or the desire to meet you in that request, right?
Yeah.
And not taking that personally, right? Being ready to absorb that in neutrality and in power.
For a man who's listening right now, and a question I imagine they may have is, how do I know if I'm ready to ask that and receive a no? Because that is a good point, is that if you're truly ready not to receive, like, you're benevolent, like you've achieved
Mm-hmm.
neutrality and benevolence, and you ask for what you want, and if they say no, it doesn't sweep your legs out, it doesn't trigger you, and you're okay.
Mm-hmm.
How does a man know if he's in that place?
Yeah, that's a good practice of self observation as well, right?
Mm-hmm.
Prior to that ask, or even in practice right now, if you were to write down, 5 requests that have been at the tip of your tongue that you've restrained, right? Professionally or relationally, whatever it is, and simply play that in your mind. If I asked this, if I made this request verbally or with my actions or with my body, and it was a no, it was a hard stop, it was a no, would that send shockwaves and charge through my body and nervous system? Would it cause a trigger and a lashing out and a defensiveness? Would I start justifying and attacking, right? Or can I practice saying, I honor and respect where you're at, right? And practice that until that feels available and most
Mm-hmm.
available within your skillful replies to that. And I'd say once you can feel that strength of neutrality, and it doesn't necessarily have to get to a point of total non-attachment to that result because you're requesting it. There is likely an attachment to
Mm-hmm.
that desire, and it might be, it might be, you know, a bit of a stretch to feel totally non-attached to something you desire enough to make a request of. And I think there's a middle ground there where can you receive a no compassionately, knowing that it's not personal, knowing that it is an expression of someone else's boundary or capacity or whatever it is, and simply be okay with I honor where you're at.
Yeah, I love that. That's a great practice. And it actually brought up a memory for me of um, I don't even remember what it was, and this is interesting the way this has stuck with me. But what you just said reminded me of it. I remember asking my partner something at one point, um, and I think this was years ago. We were having some trouble in the relationship. It was some challenging time for us, and I remember simultaneously feeling really sad, like a high level of sadness at her response, and also a high level of admiration for the boundary she was creating for herself. And it's important to communicate to you men listening that it is possible to experience sadness without creating or without removing safety for their
Mhm.
boundary. In fact, it's possible to appreciate them as a person and appreciate as a fellow human the work that goes into creating a boundary
Mhm.
while also feeling deep sadness
Right.
because you didn't get the response you wanted.
Mhm.
That doesn't mean that there's a lack of safety. That doesn't mean anything's wrong. It's part of being a human, and the way
Mhm.
you uh, metabolize that experience
Mm.
is what makes it safe or unsafe. What you do
Right.
next is what makes it safe or unsafe.
Totally. There's nuance with all of this. It's every conversation has nuance, and on the topic of emotions, right? Um, an important thing to self-check, right, is yes, you can absolutely experience the sadness um, or even the anger, right, that creates, right? You can experience whatever reaction is genuine, even if you've prepared yourself to accept whatever answer is given. And there's something to be said, and this is more of a question for you, Eric, is tending to those emotions that arise in response. Often you're going to be in it with that person where a request was made and an answer was given and emotions are generated. And as is typical, that sadness or that anger may get weaponized, right? This is making me
Mm-hmm.
sad. That person absorbs that as I made you sad and it's not safe for me to feel this because he's going to feel this, right? And then you get into that dance and that spin and it becomes incoherent and sloppy and messy, right? So when you do have
Yeah.
an emotional response, which is totally fair, right, for you to
Mm-hmm.
feel disappointment around something, how would you suggest is the most clean and effective way to observe those emotions, to tend to them without inadvertently weaponizing them and actually creating further discord with the person you're in relationship with?
Yeah, that's a really important piece. One of the answers that seems to be the answer to so many different things in this journey, in this path, is a deep breath over and over again if it's available to
Mm-hmm.
you. If it's not available to you, it's probably time to pause the conversation.
Mm-hmm.
Because if you lose your breath, whether it be an argument or sex or any situation, you're going to move into compulsive behavior. It's like
Mhm.
turning on autopilot, and you're going to go back to your old ways, whatever those old ways
Right.
were. So, assuming that your old ways of communicating weren't as skillful as your current ways, if you lose the breath, time to hit pause on the
Hmm.
conversation and just own where you're at. Like, I'd love to continue this, and I need to step out for
Yeah.
right now. That's valid. That's totally
Hmm.
valid. In fact, that can be very skillful and very noble and virtuous to do that. And it may
Hmm.
piss your partner off, and that's okay too.
Right.
Those are their feelings, and or a work person or a friend.
Hmm.
And what I have found is if I'm able to keep my breath, that tells me I'm in a place where I'm able to stay in the conversation in a good way. And for me, remembering back to that moment I just shared, the way I handled that was uh, I owned it. I owned where I was and shared that I feel really sad
Hmm.
because that's not the answer I wanted to hear. And I feel really proud of you and inspired by your ability to create that boundary. And I'm pretty sure that was out of those two, that was the one where uh, I feel like there were tears for me,
Mm.
which is interesting. Um, and no matter what the cocktail is, if one partner is checked out, it's probably best to pause the conversation.
Hmm.
And if you guys are on the verge, refocus on what your intention is for the conversation.
Right.
Meaning, if you're on the verge of going out of bounds, whether that be into name calling or causing undoing harm or, um, you know, raising your voice or becoming violent in some way, um, refocusing on, look, my intention for this conversation was to communicate that I have a desire and I wanted
Hmm.
to ask that. And
Hmm.
I hear X, Y, and Z, whatever X, Y, and Z is neutrally, if you're able to repeat that neutrally.
Hmm.
I hear you, and that's fine. And if there needs to be further communication, do it. If not, take a moment. That's
Yeah.
that's probably the most powerful thing to do if you're at the place where things are on the borderline of spiraling out of control.
Hmm. There's been a lot of rich word for word offerings that you just brought to this conversation, and that might be worth a re listen for men in relationships who, on occasion or on frequent occasion, get into conversation with their partner that is challenging. And there's one other piece within there that is a bit of a tangent, but I think is so important to bring up, even as a reminder, in case we may have mentioned it in other episodes. But creating acceptability of pulling out of a conversation without that being an abandonment or a violent withdrawal is so necessary in healthy relating, right? There are limits to what can be healthy in a given conversation or in a given challenging conversation. And I feel like there's such fierce and strong conditioning that leaving the conversation, even consciously, even saying, I feel like we've reached a limit for now, I'd like some space, creates and triggers so much additional charge of, this being dramatic and desperate and us not going to make it, right? It triggers a lot of fears that may or may not have, a basis in the reality. So the invitation there is having a conversation when things are good, right? Not in a moment of
Mm-hmm.
charge, but in a normal time, and saying, I'd love to just sit down for half an hour and share what's most important for me in our own communication for when moments do arise that are challenging. Um, what I am committing to is in pausing a conversation when I feel it is beginning to cross this line. And what I will say in these times is I'd like some time to come back down and reground and recenter myself. And when I say that, it's not me pulling away from you. It's not me rejecting you. It's not me giving up on us. It's me respecting and honoring us and not wanting to incur or cause further harm and damage through the clumsiness that I sense myself leaning towards. And that may create a whole other conversation at that
Mm-hmm.
time if you say that. And that could be healthy because it
Mm-hmm.
starts giving some clarity in what you are experiencing when you say things, and it limits what will be assumed or projected in her or him or your business partner, whoever it is, when that arises.
Yeah, I want to add to that. Your partner, if this is within the context of an intimate partnership, and your partner is primarily a more feminine being in their natural state, they may experience this as a limitation of their expression and of the collective expression of your communicating and relationship, because essentially you're bringing in some like ground rules,
Mm-hmm.
right? And what's really important, again, going back to skillful means, is okay, this is what you want, and you're going to ask for it, right? You're wanting to have some ground rules because you believe it's going to provide a framework for a more love and deeper communication and
Mm-hmm.
less harm in the relationship. What they're going to want to hear is how this is part of your devotion and commitment to love
Mm.
and loving
Right.
them in a way that never crosses the line.
Right.
And if they feel that that's the center of this, then they will be more likely to uh, go along with it. And this is a good example of where manipulation and skillful means can
Mm-hmm.
be used in a dignified, virtuous way for the greater good,
Mm-hmm.
rather than coming out and being very straight and saying, look, sometimes I say shitty things and sometimes you say shitty things.
Mm.
Sometimes we go too far. In fact, that last time you went too far, and let's set these rules so that doesn't happen anymore. That's going to land a lot different than also being honest and skillful, right?
Mm.
And so this is a good time to illustrate what it looks like to ask for what you want in a skillful way,
Right.
right? Where you may be more likely to receive it.
Mm. Yeah, that's awesome. Um, and you'll know, and you likely do know what those limits are right now in your conversations. There's often kind of this point where nothing good or nothing productive happens beyond it until you exhaust yourselves into tepid reconciliation, right? Where it's just like, I don't know where we've landed. We've exchanged a lot of blows. We're both on the verge of being knocked out. I don't know what to say, but I want this to be over.
Yeah.
So let me just say something that will end this, right? And give a little bit of ground and hope you give a little bit, and let's inch our
Oh,
way back into, I guess, what is a peace treaty for this evening. Um,
oh.
so nothing truly productive. And when I say productive, I mean something that enhances trust, connection, love, and
Mm-hmm.
intimacy, right? Let's define effective. Um, Beating each other into submission verbally, emotionally, right, or otherwise isn't achieving any of those, right? That is the
Mm-hmm.
furthest thing from skillful. Um, so having that conversation about the ground rules in the way that Eric elucidated and invited is one of the more powerful things you could do for your relationship if you haven't already. It goes back down to that saying. I don't know if this is a widely widely held saying or one just in my imagination, right? But like, nothing good happens in a bar beyond midnight, right? That's just where nothing good is going to happen, right? Well,
Yeah.
nothing good or productive is going to happen in our exchanges once I'm at this point, or once you're in this point, or once we're together at this point, right? And that's usually where you want to trigger the circuit breaker in a loving way. So, is that a real
Yeah,
saying? Nothing good happens in a bar beyond midnight?
it should be if it's not, because I checked it out in my mind. I was like, yeah, that's true for sure.
Right.
um, there's one other area just to shifting gears a bit, that I think is worth taking a look at, and that's this idea of covert contracts or covert agreements, and how within relationship, whether it be professional, friendship, or intimate, we can sometimes loosely express a desire
Mm-hmm.
because maybe to ask for it fully might push us beyond our comfort level, might push us beyond our edge, and we could walk away from that interaction with the idea that, okay, we have an agreement or we have an understanding,
Right.
right? That's a commonly used phrase that if you ever find yourself saying we have an understanding, you should really check it out. I would invite you to check that out, because
Mm-hmm.
often what that means is like, I've hinted at what might happen if I don't get what I want, uh, and that's quite an unreasonable situation to expect. And yet I've done it, and I know
Mm-hmm.
many people, and I've worked with many people who operate that way on the reg. So
Mm-hmm.
looking at this, when we're unclear with ourselves or with others on what we want, what are we leaving the opportunity for? Well, we're almost building a back door into this loose agreement, so that
Right.
if we're upset with each other in any way, we can weaponize the part of that agreement that was unfulfilled as a
Mm-hmm.
character attack on the other person.
Right. Yeah.
Clarity in the agreement, clarity in what we're asking for, eliminates that.
Mm-hmm.
And this is such a huge piece, not only for ourselves and being clear with our goals and clear with what we're asking of ourselves, but especially when we ask somebody else for something, being
Mm-hmm.
really clear and ensuring that clarity is there for both people is our responsibility as the one asking.
Right. That's a really important distinction. Um, there's a lot more digging we could do in this topic, right?
Sure.
We could devote an entire conversation and guided journey around the roots of disappointment, right? And the fear of disappointment. We could do an entire discovery and unpacking of who is it, or what archetype within our relational sphere is it that would even want to weaponize anything against our partner, right? What what are we feeling so adversarial towards at a core level, right? And what is the fear driving that? And ultimately, those are explorations that require their own containers and their own safety. And we're available for those conversations if that resonates and you're tuning into the parts of you that, geez, why would I ever want to weaponize something against my partner? Right? Or why would I ever want to hold this as a leverage point? Why am I playing that game? Who is it that is still playing that game? Who is it that feels like it would be so devastating to get a no on this and I can't handle that? All these components obviously are interwoven and require their own examination in your personal practice or in a group setting or a one-on-one setting, and is quote unquote the work, or the work as it relates to this topic. And I would love to wrap this one up with a remedial practice that can give you um, a nearly instant or immediate self correction in how your inner stance when you are making requests and sharing those requests, and how to do so powerfully in a way that is non-weaponized and also direct, clear, and in a way that you are willing to receive. So, yeah, would you initiate us into that one, Eric?
Sure, absolutely. So, what I would invite you to do just right now, taking a moment to close your eyes and to take a nice deep breath in. And in this moment, we're going to invite what is most true for you to rise to the surface. And I have a suspicion that you are already familiar with which one this is, which request you have been holding down or holding back. And just allow a moment to receive the answer to that question. What is it that I am wanting but have held back the request for? And if you need a bit of time, you can pause, but for everyone else, I would invite you to open your eyes and to write down what that thing is. Write down the request, write down who you're asking it to. In fact, I would write their name, comma, and put the question when you write it down so that you can look at that, and then you can close your eyes and imagine yourself asking for it. And Ryan had offered a practice earlier where to see if you're ready to ask it. And if you're not ready, to get yourself ready. And just rehearse and feel yourself breathing while asking. Breathing while asking. Then practice receiving a negative response and continuing to breathe. And if you're able to metabolize that experience, even with emotion, but you're able to stay with your breath and you're able to stay in it and calm, then you're ready to make that request. And take as much time as you need to practice the request. But our invitation to you is that you make this request within the next 3 days. 3 days gives you time to prepare your nervous system, your mind, your body to get on board. And it doesn't give you enough time to bail out. And of course, at the end of the day, this is you and you're responsible for you. And if you decide, hey, I'm not ready, that is 100% valid too. Our invitation here is to do the strengthening work required so that you will be ready. And if you do that, you may be surprised at the liberation you experience after asking the question, regardless of the reply. Because when we experience fear, often the fear at its deepest level is I'm going to lose love or I might die. And when you ask for what you want, the thing you were afraid to ask for, and you don't die and you don't lose love, well, there's an expansion to your reality because your beliefs about your reality shift. And that's a win no matter what the reply is.
That's powerful. That is awesome. My invitation is for those who have chosen to accept that practice to let us know if you feel called, what you are requesting, the day you plan to request it, when you plan to request it, and follow up with how that landed, how that experience unfolded for you. Any challenges that came up in readying your nervous system and your body to receive an answer with as much equanimity as possible. Note the expansion you feel and simply tuning to your power and capacity to ask it. That is one of the greatest gifts of this practice, is who you've become and simply being able to express that. That is one of the ultimate expansions and elevations you may experience, especially if you've been prone to holding back. So it is a simple practice, and it may even be an easy one. I won't even say it's a difficult one. It could fall anywhere on that spectrum.
Mm.
And ultimately, it is one of great liberation and great expansion of consciousness and capacity. So, thank you for that offering. And I would love to close this down if you feel complete.
I feel complete. Yeah, let's do it. So, men, at this time, just bringing your awareness and your observatory lens into your body, breathing down into your belly and allowing yourself to observe anything that may have shifted, anything that feels stronger, anything that still feels weak. And at this time, we ask that all that is right and perfect for you to integrate now and over the next few days be rolled up and strengthened onto your midline. Anything else should be released through the exit portals, which we can strengthen now. At this time, we want to dedicate our podcast today to the upliftment of suffering and confusion for all sentient beings and the amplification of love energy on this planet and beyond. And at this time, we seal up our session, sealing, guarding, protecting. It is sealed, it is finished, it is done, so it is, and so be it.